He thinks that he can make Saudi Arabia great again. He literally told one senator that he fears assassination if this happens, if he normalizes. Trump said about Mohammed bin Salman, we put our guy in power.
How faithful do you think Saudi Arabia really is to the plan of a Palestinian state? How do you assess the ordinary Saudi and their sentiments towards Palestine?
So he can control the narrative to give you false impression, and for me to be protected from my own people. 98% of people absolutely supports the Palestinian cause. And then 90-something% is completely against normalization. State security apparatus, which is the most horrific institution in Saudi Arabia, in charge of prosecuting, investigating, detaining, and torturing people. My father represented a discourse that is not controlled by the state.
Despite the recent incendiary declaration by Trump to occupy Gaza and clean the land of Palestinians, there remains fervent talk that normalization with Saudi is on the cards. The de facto leader Mohammed Bin Salman has made it clear that he wants to make public what is very much the reality, his embrace of Israel and probably the most significant political prize to the genocidal state. The kingdom, in many ways, is rapidly moving towards a westernization, at least in economic and cultural terms, with concerts and sporting events and the mass incarceration of the many scholars, including the father of my guest today, Shaykh Salman Alaoudh. We are honored to have Abdullah Alaoudh on the show to help us understand the new Saudi Arabia and its extremes. Abdullah Alaoudh is a legal scholar from Saudi Arabia. He's currently the Senior Director of Countering Authoritarianism at the Middle East Democracy Center and Secretary General of the Saudi National Assembly Party. Abdullah Alaoudh, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and welcome to The Thinking Muslim.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you so much for having me. It's my pleasure and honor.
Jazakallah khair. Well, it's wonderful to have you with us. And we're speaking a few days after that incendiary press conference with Netanyahu and Trump, of course, where he announced that he plans to colonize Gaza and disperse its 2 million plus population. I suppose my question for you is, where does this leave the normalization process with Saudi Arabia?
Well, let's go back to one specific moment in history, which is when son-in-law of Trump, like prior to his first term, got to know the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed Bin Salman. And if you go to that interview that Jared Kushner did, it's actually a podcast in which he laid down in details that relationship between him and Mohammed Bin Salman. And he said somebody from Mohammed Bin Salman's team by the name of Fahd al-Tunisi, he's an economist, by the way, approached Jared Kushner, and in that, communication, they said Mohammed Bin Salman is somebody who is looking forward to a great relationship with the US, and he's willing to do a lot of reforms, and will look into files that have not been looked at before. And I think I want to underline this. And then, so Jared Kushner said, well, we have on the top of the agenda three files. One is the file of Islamic Madrasa / Wahhabism. The second file is treatment of women. And the third and most important file of all is the situation of Israel in the region. So Fahd al-Tunisi responded back and he said, well, we are a few steps ahead. We have already written a proposal and we'll send it your way and see how it looks. So they sent the proposal for the, of course, top of the agenda, the relationship to Israel, and Mohammed Bin Salman and Fahd al-Tunisi in that secret document that actually Jared Kushner just talked about, laid down the map and the pathway to normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel. And he said Israel should be treated as a normal player in the region, and Saudi Arabia is going to be able to help toward that goal. So I want to remind you, this all happened before Mohammed bin Salman even became crown prince. If you wonder about the relationship from Mohammed bin Salman and the power and why Trump put like their weight behind this guy, and if you look at the Bob Woodward, biography that he did for Trump about Trump, he Trump said about Mohammed bin Salman, we put our guy in power, meaning Mohammed bin Salman in power. Also, he said we saved his, we saved him. I think that's the safest way to describe the vulgarity of his phrasing toward that. Speaking about Mohammed bin Salman right after Khashoggi, the Saudi journalist who was killed and dismembered at the Saudi consulate, the Saudi journalist who was killed and dismembered at the Saudi consulate in Istanbul on October 2nd, 2018. So part of why Trump put all the, just to answer your question, put all his weight behind Mohammed bin Salman, why they weathered the storm during the Khashoggi, why they saved him, why they put everything behind him, is to basically pay his part of the price, to fulfill his part of the deal, which is you come to power, we'll support you as crown prince, removing former crown prince Mohammed bin Nayef from power, making you the the sheriff of town, making you the head of power. In your turn, you're going to do certain things, but on the top of the agenda is normalize with Israel. And of course, have this huge transaction deals with the US in terms of arms sales and, and you name it. So if you look at the context of all what happened, and how Mohammed bin Salman came to power, and this relationship to Jared Kushner, the normalization is just an expected, anticipated result of this sick relationship with Jared Kushner, the US, the Trump administration, and the West in general. Mohammed bin Salman came to power like a large, I would say, if I'm going to be really fair, a large portion of why he came to power is basically to fulfill this promise, at least the promise that he made to Jared Kushner, that he's going to normalize with Israel and make it easier for Israel to be a normal actor in the region.
That's really interesting. At that press conference, a journalist asked Donald Trump a question about Saudi Arabia and whether it was so interested in a Palestinian state. And he said, Donald Trump responded by saying, no, MBS and Mohammed bin Salman was not interested in, that didn't feature in the negotiations very prominently. But of course, Saudi Arabia was one of the first countries in the region to respond with a very strong denunciation of this plan to clean out, as Trump would put it, Gazans and establish a Riviera in the heart of the Middle East. So how faithful do you think Saudi Arabia really is to the plan of a Palestinian state?
Well, a few points here. It's funny you mentioned this. I was with somebody who is an insider. I'll just describe him as such because I don't want to expose this guy, just in respect for our confidential conversation. So he was asked about whether this guy that he knew, Mohammed bin Salman, or still cares about the Palestinian issue, and he literally said he probably doesn't. And it's not just a guess from somebody who knew Mohammed bin Salman well, but also it's what Mohammed bin Salman said confidentially to some of the senior officials in the U.S. administration. This had been leaked in the past, but it probably didn't get the attention it deserved. The the point I want to make here, number one, is that Mohammed bin Salman came with this, and the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, with this hyper-nationalist agenda, hyper-nationalist discourse that does not care about what some of the people in the Muslim world call it strategic interest, and the deep strategy for Muslims, which is this relationship to the Muslim world, having the soft power with the Muslim world or the Arab world, having a relationship to Arab countries. He thinks that he can make Saudi Arabia great again, if we're going to use Trump's words. He thinks that Saudi Arabia is for the Saudis, and I'm not making this up. I swear to God, it's a slogan that is used by a lot of the Saudi bots on Twitter for so many years. There are actually devoted accounts on Twitter and elsewhere. It's a dedicated project and program within the Saudi government to cut all relationship between the Saudi people and other Arab people and Muslim people around the world, because they want the Saudi people to be isolated, easier to manipulate, easier to control, and also in case of incidents like the Arab Spring revolution or things like what happened in Syria right now, the Saudis will be isolated enough, will have their own issues, will have their own programs, will have their own, and that's, by the way, it comes to the question about liberalization and all in Saudi Arabia. So they have their own programs and agenda and ideas. So this is number one, is this like hyper-nationalist agenda, Saudi first, Saudi Arabia is for the Saudis, and that's why also you see the mistreatment of workers, you see the mistreatment of expats, you see the immigrants even in Saudi Arabia being mistreated with, like we have been documented, like literally tens of thousands of people being tortured. Like a lot of them were actually actually a lot of them died in the process of building, cities basically and projects. So that's number one about why this sense of carelessness about the Palestinian issue. So when you know this point, I want to tell you the second point, which is the fact that I just mentioned. Mohammed bin Salman himself told that a lot of people that he does not care about the Palestinian issue. All he cares about is what Palestinian issue can bring to the Saudi side, what the Palestinian issue can offer to make Saudi Arabia more powerful, richer, and that's when the discourse with the statement that was just put out can serve. So the third point I want to make is Mohammed bin Salman used the feeling, the sense, the absolute sense among the vast majority of the Saudi people and like vast majority of the Muslim people, of the Arab people toward Palestine, defending the land against occupation, against apartheid. He used that not to embark on a project to serve the Palestinian cause, but rather to use it for more gains for the Saudi government. And I'm going to explain how in three quick points here. So point number one is that Mohammed bin Salman, when he talked to the West generally in English, he told them many times, and he tells it still to a lot of officials, that it's not that he's not going to normalize, he's not going to basically sell out, but rather he's going to have a price. And if you ask why the price, he says, and that's number two, that Sadat was assassinated when he normalized, and Saudi Arabia is right now is more important than Egypt. The Saudi situation and being the stronghold of Muslims and being the land of the two holy mosques, and how that relates to the third holy mosque is a really essential and symbolic, hugely symbolic relationship. But therefore, he's not going to give it up for a smaller price. And so he used that. He talked about assassination, and he literally told one senator that he fears assassination if this happens, if he normalizes without a price. And for the assassination to be basically prevented, he has to be protected. So we come to the third point, which is the thing that he made about the three requirements or requests that he made to the U.S. administration. And by the way, not to the Israelis. He's not negotiating with the Israelis, which is funny. He's negotiating with the U.S. on the conditions of how he's going to normalize with Israel. And the three conditions, basically, he said, one is to develop a nuclear, peaceful nuclear program. Two is to have a NATO like agreement with the U.S. security agreement. The three is a huge transaction of arms sales, including F-35. Now, if you look at the conditions, and by the way, they are like public. They have been made public by everyone, by a lot of people now. It's not secret. None of these things is related to Palestine, to Gaza, West Bank, Muslims around the world, to the Palestinian cause, Palestinian issue. It just goes to the first point I made, which is this hyper-nationalist agenda. It has nothing to do with the Arab world, has nothing to do with the Palestinian. Now, I want to end with this point. I don't want to take a lot of time at this question, but I want to end with this point. So now, if you wonder why the strong rhetoric and statement coming out from Saudi Arabia right now with all the pressure for normalization, well, again, he wants a price. I mean, he wants to show that, the Saudi people is not going to tolerate me for doing this without a price, and for me to be protected from my own people, from the Arab world, from the Muslim world, from my own even forces. I have to be given this absolute protection mechanisms, including this security agreement. By the way, it has to be approved by the Senate for this, because he did not want he doesn't want an agreement that going to be torn apart with the next admin, with the next president or somebody in the future. He wants something NATO-like. And just to explain to the viewers what a NATO-like agreement look like, it is when a country is attacked, the U.S. defends it like its own country, like its own land, like it's part of the of the U.S., like it's 51st state or 52nd state.
Yeah, that's really important. So in many ways, your argument is that Mohammed bin Salman is using the Palestinian cause as leverage, and the apparent reticence that exists there is not reticence. He just wants to establish the right price for his normalization. Now, in your answer there, you spoke about the anger, the wrath of the Saudi population and the general Arab population. Of course, Saudi Arabia, politically at least, is a very closed society. And we can often, from the outside, get the impression that there is a muted response, unlike most of the Arab world, towards Palestine. And maybe we can come to the false impression or true, and I would like your answer to this, that many in Saudi share Mohammed bin Salman's view towards Palestine, that it's unimportant for moving forward. I mean, how do you assess the ordinary Saudi and their sentiments, I suppose, towards Palestine?
That's a great question. Well, let me put a few points here. So, number one, polling in Saudi Arabia is illegal. I know people who were detained, arrested, tortured because they asked people on the street about general questions, not about Mohammed Bin Salman, even some of the programs. And this is for a reason. Of course, no election, nothing, no polling. Why is that? So he can control the narrative. And how he does that, that's number two, by creating a large army online to give you false impression, to give me false impression about what the Saudi people look like, how the Saudi people feel. You will see thousands and thousands of people pouring into your own account once you mention Saudi Arabia about anything, or the Crown Prince, or one program, or whatever they do. But they have a similar thing. It's easier to detect. They always have Mohammed Bin Salman on their profile. They have one of the program. They put either 2030 or some of the other, telling, I guess, tales about what these accounts are. We used to call them bots, but I think now it's larger. They're like real people behind, like getting paid, like behind laptops and desktops, basically, writing about Saudi Arabia all the time, getting paid full time, thousands and thousands of them. And why is that? Because they want to give you the impression about Saudi Arabia. And they want to tell you whatever the Crown Prince says, it's the general feeling of the public. That's what the public in Saudi Arabia feels like. But sometimes, from time to time, they slip in something that comes kind of out of control, tells about what the public looks like or feels like. When one time the Saudi government was pressed about why they don't go quickly for normalization, they suddenly, finally, gave an accurate assessment and polls about the vast majority, and they said 98% of the Saudi people, not talking about the Arab people, Saudi people have been manipulated for a decade now. They have been controlled, tortured with this narrative, with this rhetoric, like dedication of thousands of accounts of programs and everything about Palestine, trying to distort the idea that Palestine has an issue, that Palestinians are people with a right, that, about the occupation, the apartheid, talking about Israelis as being friendly and talking friendly about the idea of Israel and being part of the region. Despite all of that, 98% of people absolutely supports the Palestinian cause. And then 90-something percent is completely against normalization. Against normalization. And by the way, they only had to publish this once to prove to the West that it is harder for them to normalize without a real price. They only, I think that tells about the Saudi people more than anything. So if anybody is just told or deceived basically about how the Saudi public, the general public, feel about Palestine, the Palestinian issue, the Palestinian cause, on all of these issues, I told them to just, I warned them against taking the impression from Twitter, from social, networks generally about, people that you hear from Saudi Arabia. Because if you say anything else, you'll be arrested. I'll give you just a quick example. My own cousin, Abdullah Alaoudh, he was detained for many years because he was against normalization. And Noha Al-Bloui, she was arrested and detained because also she said something long time ago about normalization, and nobody said anything. It sent a message to everyone in Saudi Arabia that you're not just going to not talk about critically talk about projects in Saudi Arabia, but also even foreign policy that kind of disagree with what what is going to be the foreign policy of Saudi Arabia can get you detained and tortured. So nobody can say anything. So this, I think this answers your question.
It very much does. I do want to talk about the so-called modernization or liberalization project and the role of the scholarly class today in the past. But just to pick up on a point you made there about the conditions that Mohammed bin Salman has set in order to normalize with Israel. And these are negotiations, as you said, with the United States. The NATO-style defense agreement, the transfer of nuclear know-how. How close do you feel that America is ready to engage on that level? I mean, before Trump's statement this last week, there was a lot of speculation in the press that normalization was coming very, very soon. Does that indicate that the Americans are very much ready to sign a NATO-style agreement with Saudi?
I think it's very unlikely at the moment. So not sure if Trump is going to do this, and not because Trump couldn't or doesn't want to. I think he wants to, and he has no problem doing that. It's just like it will need a Senate approval. For the Senate approval, it is very, very hard to get the Democrats on board with such a pure Republican project, basically, of protecting Mohammed bin Salman. And for the new civic nuke program, Lindsey Graham basically said it once that he thinks a help of sort. It will probably be a humble kind of project. It's not what a lot of people. It's not what it sounds like, but they will make sure that it's something that satisfies the minimum of what the Saudi wants, and at the same time doesn't do anything really, and also make it easier for the Saudis to normalize. So for the security agreement, that's one. For the nuclear program, that's two. As to the transactions, of course, it's going like expected before. As you may saw in the news, like $6 billion, even more than what Trump asked for, have been offered by the Crown Prince to Trump. And this is probably not because investment or economic reasons. Otherwise, they would have done it a long time ago. It's for pure political reasons, for the protection of Mohammed bin Salman, his own throne, and his own way to power.
Abdullah, how do you assess the political abilities of Mohammed bin Salman? I mean, is there a method behind what seems sometimes like a lack of strategy?
Well, look, there is sometimes a method of analyzing such behavior from such dictators, which is to throw in there the irrational factor, like seeing sometimes how decisions were made in the past, and you'll be laughing of how analysts from the West or elsewhere kind of overthink a lot of stuff and how they were made. Of course, yeah, there are like major decisions that are contemplated enough, went through consultation and experts but there are decisions that was just like made because they want to prove a point, or they want to have a posture of sort to one region or another, to one people or another. So just to the question of the rationality, like if you look at the war in Yemen, for example, it was made overnight. Even the Crown Prince at that time didn't know, was not completely on board, and this is not a secret. The king, of course, has nothing to do with anything. He has no idea about what's going on. And part of what he did it is like he said he wants to kick out Houthi from, Sana'a. Houthi now has a stronger, position in Sana'a and elsewhere. Houthi are much stronger than when the war started. None of the, goals were achieved. When Mohammed bin Salman blockaded Qatar, he said he's going to make Qatar less impactful and weaker. Qatar is stronger after years and years of blockade. And when he put the Prime Minister of Lebanon under house arrest, Al-Hariri, and slapped him in the face, so Al-Hahtani did, they thought they're going to basically restructure the Lebanese political dynamics and make it, better for Saudi Arabia and its interest. It never had, none of this achieved anything at all. They cut relationship with Canada over a tweet because they tweeted about Samar Badawi. And what did this lead to? Anything fruitful at all? Nothing. It's just like they came back to diplomatic relationship with Canada, and it just sent nothing. It just showed that there is an irrational actor. Of course, now the foreign policy is starting to get a bit less, I would say, masculine, a bit less aggressive, more steady, at least pattern than the past. But it's still, the irrational actor is there. The general, I think, theme for many other what would have been rational decisions is basically going to be this agenda of hyper-nationalist driving force of trying to restructure relationship between Saudi Arabia and neighboring countries and Muslim countries and Arab countries, and basically kind of revisit the idea that Saudi Arabia is going to subsidize a lot of stuff to other countries. That's what Mohammed Bin Salman has in mind, is that Saudi Arabia is doing a lot of great things and donating to other countries, and this should stop. It's like the same mentality that Trump comes, to the admin with, that, Trump is doing a lot of, that the US is doing a lot of, stuff for a lot of people without anything concrete in return. Mohammed Bin Salman came with that similar idea that Saudi Arabia is donating a lot of stuff, giving a lot of money, giving a lot of subsidies to neighboring countries, to Muslim countries, even to thinkers, to think tanks, to institutions. And this has to be completely revisited. Anybody that's going to have a relationship to Saudi Arabia is going to do for one of two reasons. One, because they fear Saudi Arabia, fear the wrath. So we're not going to do with the carrot, but rather with the stick. The wrath of Saudi Arabia, its influence, its soft power, its TVs, its all of that, or is going to do for Saudi Arabia something that is worth for Saudi Arabia giving you something back.
On that note, I mean, Saudi Arabia is experiencing what looks like a rapid social liberalization project with Western-style entertainment at its core. Now, from the outside, it comes across that large numbers of young Saudis are willingly embracing this new project. Is there truth to that? And maybe calling upon your earlier days as a legal scholar in Saudi Arabia, and of course, son of a very prominent imam, does that indicate how do I put it, a deficiency, I suppose, in the kind of Islam that was promoted in Saudi Arabia, if that's not an impolite way of saying it?
Well, look, in 2017, Mohammed Bin Salman said he's going to take Saudi Arabia back to 30 years ago, to prior to the year 1979. A lot of people at the time kind of interpreted this as, prior to the, one incident or another. I think he meant something either locally or regionally. Locally, the prior to the besiege of Mecca by the Juhayman al-Tabi, an ultra conservative militia leader who at the time basically terrorized pilgrims in Mecca in 1979 for the sake of applying a truer Sharia. And the other incident is the Iranian Revolution, the Islamic Revolution in Iran, that brought in the basically at that time the Islamic Revolutionary group to the Iranian surface. So he said prior to these incidents, Islam was more moderate, was more modern. It was accommodating to social norms, but at the same time open to changes. Islam never imposed a certain way of attire, a certain way of, and it goes on and on. The funny part of all of this is, like, the political part of Islam is never mentioned, like, which is like, shura, for example, or like adala, or consultation, or justice. All of these were completely dropped off the picture, because just quickly, Mohammed bin Salman, whenever he uses reform, he never use them for political it's not like the political reform. It's not like democracy, for example, election, basic liberties. Not even when he allows people to mingle, for example. It's not for everybody to do that. It's for certain people to do that in certain things. For you to, for example, be religious in a way, you're going to be arrested and tortured and questioned. But if you're going to be religious or irreligious in a way, you'll be totally respected and be used actually as a token to prove to the West and other people that they are respecting this and that and minorities and all that. Which is, by the way, like there's a minority in Saudi Arabia, the Shia, that is being prosecuted right now. So it's funny that he's trying to prove these points, the West, and trying to portray certain things, and at the same time he's also prosecuting people at home. So going back to this liberalization question, well, first of all, if you see people on the street going to some of these concerts or events, it doesn't mean necessarily that they are on board with the political project. Because I have a lot of friends who agree with me on a lot of stuff, especially politically. But if they have cinema, they will go to. If they have a good concert, they will attend. They wouldn't have a problem with that. If something that is fun, or like, let's say, an event where there is a celebration of something, or they would go to, of course, with a halal, basic halal requirements. But I mean, there are people who would do that, but at the same time, then they don't see Mohammed bin Salman as popular, for example, or they do not engage politically in a way that they are. You can see them as on board with the political project of the state. Now, what you have asked is a very deep question that it's impossible for me to answer. It will take a long time, but let me put it this way. When Saudi Arabia started in 1747, that's how it was portrayed in all textbooks, history books, in all everything that we have read when I was a kid, in all schools, universities, everywhere in Saudi Arabia. That's how Saudi Arabia started. The establishment was in 1747. Why that year is important? Because it was the year that Mohammed bin Abdul Wahhab met with Mohammed bin Saud, basically the head of the Wahhabi thought, Wahhabi thinking, the Wahhabi movement, Mohammed bin Abdul Wahhab, the founder of the movement, with Mohammed bin Saud, who was a political leader, who was very unpowerful, I would put it that way. He was only ruling one town that could not get any less important. It's not even a capital of anything, not a capital even of a region in the Najd area in the Arabian Peninsula. So it's within a region within a region within a small region that is not controlling anything. So when Mohammed Abdul Wahhab came in, he basically exploded the ideas, the level of influence, the level of importance of not just this town, but the idea of expansion in the region. And it became Saudi Arabia that we know it today, the first Saudi state that we know it today. And the whole fight was not because they want to bring people to the rule of Mohammed bin Saud, but rather to the ideas of Mohammed Abdul Wahhab, because of the ideas of unification, what they called it at the time, Tawheed, to let people, leave these practices that they described at the time as shirk and join Mohammed bin Abdul Wahhab movement. And that what made the Wahhabi movement the Wahhabi movement. So that was the idea behind, and the relationship at that time between the Imam, Mohammed Abdul Wahhab, and the Hakim, Mohammed bin Saud. That relationship was formed in that year, made Saudi Arabia. Now, right now, with Mohammed bin Salman, about 300 years later, try to interpret everything happened and try to say that Saudi Arabia is going to be Saudi Arabia either with or without Mohammed Wahhab. Therefore, Saudi Arabia started not 1747, but rather 1727, 20 years before Mohammed Abdul Wahhab came to the picture. When Mohammed bin Saud was ruling on that small town, there was nothing. That is going to be nothing for all. It's there are hundreds of leaders and rulers in the same region at that time in the Arabian Peninsula with a similar or much greater power than Mohammed bin Saud. So Mohammed bin Salman said, oh yeah, that guy ruling that town in 1727 is basically the nuclear, or what do you call it, the seed, the original seed of what has become Saudi Arabia. Basically, it's trying to distance Saudi Arabia and the country and its history from the ideas of Mohammed Abdul Wahhab and being associated with Mohammed Abdul Wahhab, and trying to distance himself from needing to consult with scholars, with imams, and making imams part of the process. So it's funny that he said he's going to go to prayer to 1979, but at the same time, not so old to Mohammed Wahhab, where this was established, this whole thing of Saudi Arabia was established, but write it at a specific moment what I wanted to, and also that specific moment, I reinterpret it in a way to portray it in a way that it just suits me right now and what I wanted to have. Not right when there were consultations between the two leaders, or there are actually circulations of powers among families, but rather when just, it's just funny how they completely misinterpret, basically spread this disinformation and misinformation about the history of Saudi Arabia in order to serve the current leader right now in his own throne. I want to just end. I know I talked so much about history and went on and all. So,
Continue.
I just want to end with this. with this idea. When As-Sahwa came, Sahwa, what is called As-Sahwa al-Islami, the Islamic Awakening movement in the 1990s, like relatively recent. So my father was part of that movement, actually a leading figure in that movement. The movement, while benefited from some and a lot of ideas from Wahhabi, also is not completely a Wahhabi thing. Wanted to make Saudi Arabia, the system in Saudi Arabia, less monarchical in a way that it consults with the people, and it basically transforms the one-man rule into like a multi-layer system of ruling in Saudi Arabia, and it's not going to be against Islam. So they wanted to prove, because it's funny, but I mean, at that time, Saudi Arabia said they're not going to be democracy because democracy is against Islam. They're only protecting Islam by not transforming it into democracy. So the Sahwa movement and the leaders afterwards tried to prove to the government that it's not against Islam, and they started to theorize about how consultation, all of these things, you don't have to call it even democracy. Forget about democracy. Let's do something more simple. Let's do something more basic, which is to have institutions that represent the ummah, the people. Call it the ummah, call it the people, and call these guys wukala, not nuwab, not like meaning Congress people or parliamentarians, but rather representatives. In Arabic, wukala, like deputies. Call them deputies. That's what happened in Islamic histories many times ago. Many times ago. It has been a method used by so many people. And don't call it elections. Call it consultations. Don't call it democracy. Call it a system of Ahl al-Hal wal-Aqd. Call it whatever you want. It's just like what leads to this idea of having a diversification of power, so no man can impose what he thinks is the right thing on people. No man can takes the blood of another man or woman because he thinks he wants to do so. No man can expropriate land or property from somebody because they feel like it.
Abdullah, I mean, Jazakallah khair. I think that's a really fascinating explanation of the history and how in many ways Mohammed bin Salman has turned against the religious establishment. Can you maybe outline for our viewers, because I think many of our viewers would not know the extent to which the religious authorities have been challenged or at least undermined, imprisoned, incarcerated, like your father in Saudi Arabia. Just give us a picture of what's happened since Mohammed bin Salman in effect came to power.
Yes, absolutely. So in a quick line of points here leading to this event, Hayat Kibar al-Ulama was established during King Faisal, 3 kings before King Salman, and this was used to basically have an official religious establishment for the Saudi government, try to basically take away interpretation from the independent scholars, from the people on the street, from the preachers, from the people in the mosque, from the imams, to imams appointed by the state, appointed by the king or the crown prince. And basically, this way you control, you manipulate the narrative like you do with the political side, with the media, with everything else, with every other institution. So basically, institutionalizing this, making it like a church that actually appointed by the state. So it's even worse than the this church state relationship in the West. So that happened before Mohammed bin Salman, and then during King Abdullah, just the king before Mohammed bin Salman, there was in 2010 royal decree made by King Abdullah to not allow anybody to issue fatwa except somebody appointed by the state. And it took it like even further. It paved the way for basically having only one thing, which is an establishment that is appointed by the state, that is submissive, that only becomes a mouthpiece, a religious basically mouthpiece for the state, and everyone else, what they call them, the peripheral ulama, or the not like centric, the ulama, or the scholars, or the imams outside this small, nuclear point, nobody can peeps. So that's basically what paved the way for Mohammed Bin Salman. So when Mohammed Bin Salman came to power in 2017, he embarked, of course, on taking over the religious institution, the state institutions, including the public prosecution, the Ministry of Interior, the Attorney General, and the state security apparatus, which is the most, horrific, infamous institution in Saudi Arabia, in charge of prosecuting, investigating, detaining, and torturing people. So Mohammed Salman did all of that in 2017, and then he started the first wave of arrest with my father. My father was basically the first guy, the first person to be arrested. He was arrested in 10 September 2017. And a lot of people, including me, say sometimes, yeah, he arrested a few hours after a tweet in which he called for reconciliation between Saudi Arabia and Qatar. But what is way beyond that, way more important than that, is that my father represented something else, represented a discourse that is not controlled by the state, a discourse that talks about Islam, yes, but also an Islam that threatens the absolute monarchy of the state, threatens the ground in which the state was established on, which is an absolute monarchy, no consultation whatsoever, no diversification of power, no separations of power, no rule of law even, nothing that so like that. So my father Islamically theorized about the how, for example, revolutions succeeded in the Arab world in 2011, at least at that time to some extent, or should succeed, and what are the methods, and how democracy is not just compatible, but the only way to basically to have the rulings and principles set out by Islam for society to flourish and to exercise even its own religion without the fear of the state. And once the state intervenes, it just controls how you think about Islam and everything else, controls about how you think about Quran and everything else. So it's dangerous not only for your own freedoms, regardless of what you think, but also if you're a Muslim, to your own Muslim thinking, and thinking about like the Muslim, the Thinking Muslim podcast. So it's about how a Muslim can think about any of these things and why they need the freedom, and how the juristic sphere, even prior to the modern state, was one of the most, wonderful highlights in our history. How they protected it from the rulers across regions, across centuries, like throughout history, and how the jurists, even prior to the Ottoman Empire, succeeded in a way that actually created what we know today as civil society institutions. It's the idea of awqaf, for example, or endowments, how that made sure that they are economically independent from the state, independent from the influence of everybody, independent even from the influence of the founder of that endowment itself. And that was just a rule made up by jurists long time ago, like 1300 years ago, where they said there must be a separation between the founder of an endowment and the endowment itself. It's an idea that is like mind blowing. It's exactly what made it possible for civil society to exist, for jurists to flourish, to say what they said. It has become this huge compilations of fiqh, of jurisprudence, of like in Islam, that is not comparable with anything existed in history because of this.
That's really fantastic. But then, how much is your father, Salman Alaoudh, not only a challenge to the establishment, the political establishment, but actually in many ways a challenge to traditional Salafism, which has been, let's say, apolitical and used by the state and used by political rulers to control not only Saudi population, but control the Islamic narrative the world over.
Well, yeah, look, I think he was a threat because of these reasons, exactly. Because he comes from that background. He knows the know-how. He knows how all of this existed. He studied, basically, literally, all of these folks. He knew them personally. They respected him. And more than that, he established his own authority in understanding, interpreting, and teaching, including training people on how to interpret these texts and how to explain them for many years. And therefore, he kind of established his own school of thought that the state felt threatened. And for some times, they tolerated his existence because they thought they needed much larger influence to basically remove someone like my father from the picture. He was respected even by princes, by people, by scholars that even disagreed with him, by Sunni, Shi'i, by liberals, Muslim, Islamists, like all. And he was followed by millions and millions of people on all social media accounts. And I remember there was a time, like prior to King Abdullah, even King Salman, when he tweets, the king will pick up the phone and call my father and ask him to remove, like delete a tweet. It's that level of influence and importance that he made that made him even more of a threat. That he is not somebody that you can overlook, So what Mohammed bin Salman did is he basically took the bet. Something that kings and princes didn't dare to do, which is to basically say that he respects the religion and Islam and religious establishment, but these guys are threatening the religious establishment, and therefore I can take care of these guys. And basically one of the charges against him is like going against the rules of the senior scholars. I mean, the senior scholars never complained. Why you care? You know what I mean? So they arrested him and they tried to sell it to the public, like, oh yeah, he is against what has been established by the state as Islamic ruling. Like if Mohammed bin Salman is the protector of Islam or the guardian, like suddenly of faith or whatever, like the Amir al-Mu'mineen suddenly. Anyway, so I think that I mean the method that he used was familiar to the Salafi, was familiar to the Muslims in Saudi Arabia and Muslim scholars generally, and that's why he was not disputed as somebody who has his own methods. So that what made him more even dangerous for the state is that he understands the methods, he respects them, he has different interpretations, different school of thought, different school of thinking, and at the same time is influential on the ground, pushing for political reforms. That I mean, basically, that this package is something that the state can fear the most. And I think that was actually the title of a paper that Malawi Rashid did on my father. And like why the state fears Salman Alaoudh the most, because of these things. She laid them down about like the methods, the ideas, and the things that he brought about. And I just want to like end this question by this idea of his that I remember vividly because I like it so much. In 2007 and 8, when he was asked about like sin, and he talked about like the idea of sin in Islam, when you sin, and he said, but we sometimes get over obsessed with a personal sin, and forget a much more impactful sin, which is the collective sin, which is the societal sin. And he was asked, what was that? He said, it's the societal sin of not embarking on reforms, of not respecting freedoms of people, of not bringing society to the future, of not pushing forward for a stronger society, a more respectful society, something that can, prove to the world and present to the world ideas, thoughts, and it can bring about the civilization that is missing, about us and our society.
Abdullah, we've seen uprisings across the Muslim world the Arab world for the last 15 years or so. And we saw, of course, some successes and, of course, failures as well. But Saudi Arabia has remained fairly immunized to such disturbances. Now, of course, without wishing anything negative for Saudi society, your father, many of the scholarly class Muslims want change in Saudi Arabia. How likely is that? Or has Mohammed bin Salman consolidated his rule to such an extent that any changes is probably implausible now because of the concentration of power?
Well, look, in 2011, when there was a petition my father and others pushed for, it was titled "Towards a State of Rights and Institutions." The king Abdullah at that time was shaken by it, and he delegated some of the powers to his crown prince, asking him to form a committee to discuss the ideas of that petition. And then the princes came together, and then they decided, well, it's a good idea to transform into a constitutional monarchy before this comes to our land. I mean, the revolutions of the Arab Springs it was amazing, and it was a critical moment. Only 2 people used their own powers, and some of them used their, I would say, vetoed basically the votes toward transforming the constitutional monarchy. And that guy that vetoed was actually Salman, who becomes king now, because that would prevent his way to come into power. And he didn't want that to happen. At the time, all the senior princes started to pass away, and it became basically a rule of senior and very old people. And there was a time when they thought, well, this needs to change. It needs to there need to be a new generation. And that's when Mohammed bin Naif, to some extent, before he was removed from crown prince position, came to like present this idea of basically turning this horizontal monarchy, like comes from brother to brother to brother to inherit, the rule or kingship, into more of a vertical. Is it a vertical? Yeah, vertical. Basically, monarchy from father to son and then grandson. So that's when Mohammed bin Salman came, but he realized that there are so many senior princes. There are much more experienced princes, and this institutions developed in a way that became what Jamal Khashoggi used to call the separation of branches of royal family, not branches of government. Meaning each branch of the royal family would have more power over certain, branches of government. So defense was by Sultan family, interior by the Al Naif family, the National Guard by the Abdullah family. So and then you get the idea. So it was that. So Mohammed bin Salman come and basically appended all of that system because he wants an absolute rule, an absolute power. Now, to your question, how is this related to Mohammed bin Salman having more power or less power? Well, if you look at the surface of all of this, you would say, well, now Mohammed bin Salman is more powerful than ever, and that's true. But it's more susceptible to coups, to sudden changes than ever in Saudi history, because in the past, if you want to make a coup or make a huge change, you would go after so many princes, you would go after so many institutions, you would go after so many branches of government or branches of royal family, let's say, including the king and all. But right now, if you look, in Mohammed bin Salman in one room, the whole system will collapse. It's a system of Mohammed bin Salman. They basically transformed it from Al Saud family to not just Al Salman family, but Mohammed bin Salman's rule. Not even family. It's not even Salman family. Like there are so many brothers and sisters of Salman that, and sons and daughters of Salman that have no power whatsoever. Even those who are right now helping Mohammed bin Salman with everything that he is doing. He hasn't even appointed deputy or what they called the deputy crown prince. He has, because and we don't know, even if the king dies tomorrow, we're not sure if he's going to appoint one at any time soon, because he's waiting for his son to grow up a little bit, it seems. So the idea is he has the absolute power, but at the same time, it's not old Saudi Arabia where coups and sudden changes, and because Mohammed bin Salman basically did the job, like those who wanted a coup in Saudi Arabia would have done what 80% of what Mohammed bin Salman did to his cousins and senior princes and institutions, and bringing everything under one centralized person, that is Mohammed bin Salman. Does this make sense?
It makes a lot of sense, yeah. Now, to finish off this interview, I mean, I would like to return back to your father and his personality, where he is at the moment, his condition, but also, I suppose many Westerners would probably dismiss someone like Salman Alaoudh as a regressive Salafist, as someone who deserves to be incarcerated by, a liberalizing crown prince. Thomas Friedman comes to mind, who would probably see the incarceration to be quite a positive sign for the future of Saudi Arabia. Just tell us a little bit about your father and who he is, and his current state, and your hopes for a future for him.
Yeah, absolutely. So whatever Friedman said, it's funny coming from him. The very regressive, backward who has no problem with detention and torture as long as that happened to his enemies. And somebody who basically, not just Mohammed Bin Salman, he applauded and basically promoted every prince coming to power in Saudi Arabia, and there is a record for it. I'm not making this up, by the way. It's right there. And every time a king comes to power, he promotes all this agenda of reform and change, and it's like an absolute, great moment for the West to promote and embark on these things. And also, given his Zionist agenda, of course, he would like somebody like Mohammed Salman. It's I mean, for an opportunist, somebody who thinks that about the Middle East as a lab for operations, and it's absolutely, it makes a lot of sense to see Saudi Arabia among other countries in the Middle East as ways to explore and to occupy basically the same colonization ideas, the Orientalist, the old approach, even old, very, very old Orientalist approach, not even the new Orientalist or anything. So that's I don't want to turn this into Thomas Friedman, but the idea is why it's like how my father is doing right now, and the arrest and all. So as I said, so he was arrested in September 2017, and he himself even proved and talked and had so many conversations with so many Western scholars, let alone, like, of course, Muslim scholars, but I mean Western scholars, and I invite people to read about him with the people with some like, not something that I wrote, but somebody who did his PhD dissertation on and he's teaching in French universities. Our friend Stephen Lacroix, who wrote Awakening Islam. It's a great dissertation. It's about that movement in the 1990s that my father and two of his colleagues led, and how that changed, and so many conversations that he had with my father, or to the book that Madawi Rashid, this professor of history in the London School of Economics, wrote about also my father, book titled Muted Modernists. So in the chapter about like a book that my father wrote about revolutions, questions on revolutions. So that was just to respond to this idea of what my father thinks. But the situation right now in Saudi prison is just awful. He has been in solitary confinement since day one of his arrest. He lost half of his vision and half of his hearing. He has been mistreated, tortured, and the trial is pending, and they're still seeking the death penalty against him on 37, and now it's become 41 charges against him, including corrupting earth, disagreeing with the scholars of the senior scholars of the Council of Senior Scholars in Saudi Arabia, having books that are banned in the kingdom, and calling to release political prisoners, and the charges goes on and on. It's like funny. It's like badge of honors. To be honest, all of these charges. I mean, they haven't even tried to work on it to make it look awful, look awful to the readers. They just put them as is. It's like, oh, we're gonna charge you whatever you do. It's like eating doing anything, we'll just put it in there. We'll just make up stuff and then arrest you, detain you, and torture you based on this, and seek the death penalty against you. So basically, he's still there. There are some releases in the kingdom. You may have heard tens, and some people said even to 1,000 people were released in the past few weeks. As to why, we don't know. I think it needs a lot more discussion. But we're happy that that is happening, and we're happy that some of the people were released. And on the top of the list, of course, the great guy, Dr. Mohammed Al-Qahtani, the prominent economist and activist, was released 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. And we hope, like other people, follow suit, inshallah.
Inshallah, we pray for your father, and we hope that he's released very soon, inshallah ta'ala.
Thank you so
Abdullah
much.
Alaoudh, it's really been a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for your time today. Jazakallah khair.
Thank you so much. Jazakumullah khair, brother.
Please remember to subscribe to our social media and YouTube channels, and head over to our website thinkingmuslim.com to sign up to my weekly newsletter. Jazakallah khair.